right, great. Thank you, Asia. Well, thanks everybody for coming today. Hope everyone's enjoying Inbound. I came to my first Inbound last year, and boy, oh boy, it's quite an event. I know that our business, like I became a big believer in the whole idea of content marketing and really thought leadership several years ago, and HubSpot was the one that really kind of turned the light bulb on for me on how to do that. So for us, like today, we're going to talk about activity-based selling, and this is I'd say it's the oldest concept out there, but there's a lot more technology and automation being added to it. So very much we think about how do we educate the market on this concept. So really in line with the whole thought leadership approach that I think this conference is very much about. So the crux of the idea here is that I learned over my career that the very best salespeople are not successful because they have some magic closing move or the perfect product or the best relationships. Those things kind of can happen. The reason is because it always comes down to that they have the discipline to do the right things every day that lead to the outcomes that they're looking for. That is consistently what happens. And that is exactly the topic we're going to talk about today. Because the problem is that those best salespeople don't even know they're doing it. And they think that that's just the normal way that everybody operates. And oftentimes, and this is where you really learn it, is those top sellers move in to be managers because they're good, and they realize, oh my gosh, this isn't intuitive to everybody else. It's just intuitive to me. And that can be very frustrating, but this is how you drive that consistent rigor and discipline around what really matters, which salespeople are craving. They want the direction and they want the help. So this is the topic that we're gonna be covering here today. So quick background on me. So I'm the founder and CEO of Level 11. We've been around for a little over 4 years. We've got several hundred customers. We're headquartered in Detroit, so very proud to be based in the Motor City there. A lot of great transformation and growth happening in the city, and we're thrilled to be one of the key players in a technology boom that's kind of happening in the city with some early stage companies. So I've spent my career 20 years about in sales and sales management. So worked as a direct seller for a number of years, had some success, and then figured out how to take a lot of that operational approach into management and ultimately led to found Level 11. So at my last company, this is my fourth startup, first as a CEO, but I've been through all different stages from a small little agency that I started, interactive marketing agency, then a couple other firms. But I know that the last time, my last company, a firm called ePrize, which is a really great growth story in Detroit. We started with, it was one of the first 10 employees, and we sold about 5 years ago to a private equity firm, very successful exit. And what I learned there was, lots of ups and downs, of course, but what happened was that we had purchased a CRM system in Salesforce for our sales team. We had about 150 people on the sales team. And the whole vision around buying a CRM was if I can measure what's happening within the sales organization, ultimately I can motivate what really is most important. And that all those salespeople who, yes, they want to sell as much as they can, that's how they're paid, and that's what gives them value and provide for their families, but get very lost in the day. And so the idea of the CRM was like, let's focus in on what needs to happen, but I found that second part, that motivational part, was completely missing. So that ultimately is what drove the idea behind what became Level 11, which is sales activity management. So as that quick snapshot, so we are the leader out there in the market on this new category, as we call it, in sales activity management. As you're going to see when I talk through this, I mean, in my opinion, these are basic fundamentals. It is you go back 50 years, 100 years in selling, any good salespeople or good manager is managing people around things like calls, are you having the meetings, are you finding the opportunities, are you getting the proposals out? But because recently, and every company's a little bit different, which we'll discuss, but more recently, because of all the technology that exists, you can finally measure all these things in real time. And so that's kind of where now the ability to have a solution like Level 11 in there, and there's others out there too, can automate the entire process. So we're all about how do you maximize the investment in your salespeople as well as in your sales technology. And this is important to think about. Like there's all kinds of sales technology out there. HubSpot's got some wonderful capabilities themselves, but it's very tempting when you're out there looking at all these different ideas and everything seems like the silver bullet. If I just had that would unlock all kinds of revenue potential. And many companies find themselves piled up with all kinds of sales technology that they've bought, and it's not quite scratching the itch that they're looking for. And this is why when we talk about the ROI on your salespeople is really most important, because if you think about it, let's just say you've got a 10-person sales team. So you're spending $1 million+ on those salespeople and the management support that goes around at least. Then you're spending probably another $20,000 to $40,000 to $50,000 on systems and technology to go around them. So it pales in comparison. Your big investment is in all those people. And if you're not giving those people some direction to help them spend their time in the right areas, they're making decisions on their own about how to spend their time. And we're going to get into this. Again, a lot of the salespeople, they need some direction and coaching on where to kind of focus their efforts, because only those top sellers intuitively can do it right. So for us, like, we really we feel we're on this mission to change the world of sales, to completely center around this, and going from only measuring and managing salespeople around what's closing, which of course they want to close as much as possible, to managing and motivating salespeople around the behaviors that lead to closing, the things they can really control. So today there's 3 main segments of this discussion. So I'll leave plenty of time at the end to ask questions. So if you think about things along the way, please be ready. We'll open it up here at the end. So first of all, I'll talk about how this is a bit of a new way to sell. I touched on that a little bit already. A little bit more of some shape around what exactly is this idea of activity-based selling, and then some 4 specific steps to help you get started on a change like this, if it's something that matches with your philosophy on how to run a sales organization. So first of all, I think many people may have seen this stat or heard something similar to it before from CSO Insights, it's Chief Sales Officer Insights, where every year they measure through a very robust survey how much time do salespeople spend actually selling. And so the number's around 37% in their most recent study. And why that can often be alarming, it's just kind of a reality, because if you think about it, the amount of time that a salesperson is spending in front of a customer, presenting something, trying to close a deal, whatever it might, prospecting, whatever it might be, is really only a small portion of their day. Because you've got all the other time, the rest of their time is spent on the things that they hope are ultimately going to unlock all the sales potential that they can possibly have. So the point is, if that time, again, you're making this big investment in your sales team, and if the majority of their time isn't actually in front of the customer, then let's make sure that time is spent on what really matters and is going to unlock what's really necessary. So, but we kind of break it down. There's 3 primary problems or things that get in the way. So first of all, every sales leader, I don't care if your company is blasting through its numbers or if you are egregiously behind, every sales leader feels they're not selling enough, no matter what. Again, even if you're hitting your numbers, you feel like there's more. I don't understand. I look out on my sales floors, all these people, and they all seem really busy, and they all seem very passionate to believe in our company. It sounds like they're having good conversations. I know I've got a good product. I've spent all this money on sales technology, but gosh, it feels like we should be selling more than we are. It feels like more of our salespeople should be hitting quota, whatever the numbers are. It's just this feeling that exists because it's true. And if you're any executive, when they're in that position, they have good intuition, good instincts to know there's more that's possible. And this is why any company, this is true in the economy, is constantly seeking how do we get more productivity out of the existing investments that we've made, because increasing sales and growing your company is not always about just throw more salespeople at it. It's about how do I get more impact out of this, which is helpful for the salespeople too, because that's what they want. The second thing is salespeople often are missing on the day-to-day fundamentals, or the things that I just talked about. So again, your best sellers tend to do what's necessary, but the majority, which is probably 80% of the people by count, they miss on the fundamentals. And what's amazing about this is that if you ask them, they know it. And if you stop and talk to a sales, especially when you start measuring this stuff, they realize and they admit, you know what, I'm kind of getting caught up in the wrong stuff. And when I reflect back on where I've spent my time, they kind of admit, I don't think I'm getting out there enough. I'm not prospecting enough is the common thing. I know that maybe I'm not building enough pipeline, but gosh, I just feel so busy on all this other stuff. I'm dealing with these customer service issues, or I got to write the perfect proposal, or I got to write the perfect email. It all feels right, and it's not wrong, But at the end of the day, if you're not doing what's necessary, it's not going to get you the result that you want. And you think about it, you flip that to your personal life. Like I think everyone often admits, like I probably don't eat perfectly. I don't maybe exercise as much as I should. Like you know it. You know it. And every salesperson is very much the same way. And then I could mention on CRM, because of this, oftentimes, and this is changing as these systems get better, but the salesperson looks at the CRM system as just a reporting repository. And I'm not sure how it's really helping me focus my time properly. I think that's changing a bit because it helps people, but again, a problem that many companies are facing. And lastly, that sales teams, and this is particularly the case when you have a larger sales organization with multiple offices where people are really operating in silos. You feel like, how do I unlock the best practices in one office and bring them over to another? Or how do I help, I've got a very high-performing team in Seattle, but the team in Chicago isn't quite hitting it. How do I kind of bring those teams together somehow so they can be learning from each other? So the siloed kind of sales organizations, particularly as you get bigger, can become a significant problem. So let's kind of, with that kind of backdrop, a little bit, what are we trying to get? So it's the opposite. So if you're a sales leader or an executive, you're unlocking the revenue potential, all the possible revenue potential out of your existing sales team. You're able to course correct in real time. I was talking to a customer recently, and she said how, I always have all these reports and dashboards that kind of help me, but now that I've kind of boiled it down and I'm using a more activity management approach, which we're going to get to in a little bit, suddenly I'm course correcting in real time. So as an example, maybe a lot of you have faced this before, you're going into, say, another quarter, maybe you're in the middle of this right now, and you're feeling like, gosh, we don't have enough pipeline to get to where we need to get. What happened? And then I start pulling some reports from the past and see, well, no wonder. 2 months ago, we stopped prospecting, or we weren't feeding enough leads into our sales organization, or we weren't, advancing the deals fast enough. I wish I would have known that 2 months ago, and I could have done something about it. So those who are doing this right are able to identify and spot those things in real time, where, this client at Paycor, as an example, she just walks right over, sees like, hey, we're falling behind in this, coaches the team, zips it right back up on track again. So the point is, make that stuff real time and you can course correct. Salespeople, that they're completely focused and engaged in really what matters. They know, how am I doing? Like, am I doing well? Am I doing what's necessary? This is most important for new hires. So when someone comes in and they're a new salesperson, they're not going to close the deal right away. It depends on your business, of course, but typically it takes 3 to 6 months to ramp up. And often as that new salesperson, you don't know, am I doing what's going to get me the outcome that I want? I know that it's probably going to take me a few months to get my first deal or to be hitting quota, but you always are wondering and worrying, am I doing the right thing every day that's going to ultimately get me that number and really allow me to keep my job? Like everyone's kind of feeling that. So when you're doing this right, everybody knows and they're truly engaged in what matters and they're unlocking the potential. And lastly, that again, the full team is operating in unison. They're collaborating and aligned to what's most important. So we'll get to in a little bit. So as you kind of identify the critical sales operating metrics that you function off of, these activity-based approach, everybody knows exactly what's expected of them. Everybody knows exactly how people across the company are doing, and they can identify, are there people that are doing this particularly well that I can go learn from? And they're doing that on their own. So that's kind of what we're all trying to accomplish. So then the question is, all right, it all sounds great and obvious. How do we get there? So this is where this concept of very robust and specific activity-based selling, or as we call it, sales activity management, comes in. So there's those who are doing this right are seeing pretty tremendous success. So we've got all kinds of customers and things that we read about where those who take this very rigorous approach to an activity-based selling environment are really unlocking a tremendous amount of potential. What's amazing about this, and these are just some good examples. Again, we've got customers big and small. Like these are big enterprise. We're certainly proud of the logos, but there's companies of all sizes. They have 5, 10 salespeople, 20 salespeople, whatever it might be, up to thousands. But what you see in these examples, so like Procore is a startup based out in Southern California. They had their sales development team, so those who are kind of looking for appointments or new opportunities for the salespeople, went from 5 to 60% of all the revenue coming out of that team because they got them focused on the KPIs or the sales activities that really matter. And the reason you see a number of other examples here, account winbacks and new business pipeline, but what happens is that, again, these are basic fundamentals, and salespeople realize that they're not doing it. So it's not the idea of, hey, I'm going to flip on this technology. It takes a while for it to take hold. Literally day one, a salesperson's like, thank you. Now I see right in my CRM what's expected of me. I knew that I was falling behind on these different things. I knew that I wasn't doing what's necessary. So immediately you see the ROI or impact out of it because, again, a salesperson knows exactly what's expected of them and they're making the right choices. So instead of sitting there reacting to a customer service issue, which of course is important, they figure out a better way to delegate or manage that, and they say, you know what, I can't do that right now because I'm falling behind on my prospecting. I'm falling behind on my live conversations. I'm falling behind on my face-to-face meetings. And that's something they can control and change. I had an example yesterday where a customer of ours was talking about, hey, we're really struggling. It was an SDR team was struggling to get to their new opportunity goal. And the manager looked at it, well, the reps aren't kind of hitting the activities, and the reps are frustrated because they get paid on how many opportunities they generate for the sales team. And so they just got really frustrated, and they look back at this and they say, you know what, I can't control a lot of that. I'm going to get to this in a little bit. I can't totally control closing a deal. I can't completely control that someone is on the phone and they want to have a meeting. I can't control them answering the phone. I can't control having the time to talk to me, but I can control my effort. And if they are reminded of that day in and day out, the things that you can control have to get done. That's why immediately you unlock this ROI, because it just helps people remember, to do what's really necessary. So I'd kind of break it down. There's a consulting firm out there called Vantage Point Performance. Jason Jordan is one of their partners. He actually spoke yesterday, I believe. And they're one of the few. What's interesting, there's a lot of sales consulting or sales training firms out there in the market. What's very unique about them is that they focus specifically on frontline sales managers, or how to help managers be better. Now, your salespeople, you want to coach on how to find value, how to qualify, how to present, like all this type of thing. But really, it's the managers, that if you can get those managers to manage effectively, that's how you unlock a lot of potential. So anyway, Vantage Point has done some very robust research on sales management and metrics performance, and they kind of break it down. I like the way that they separate it. So there's 3 different types of sales metrics. People think, I'm very metrics driven. I've got a lot of data. Our company, we are so data driven. We are the most modern organization out there. But if you stop and look through all of it, you can really break it down to 3 different segments. So there's metrics that are more business results, like outcome, like we're going to get more market share, we're going to more market penetration, we're going to break into a new market. Like these things you kind of can try to shape your company in a certain way, but you can't really manage it. Like you can set goals and go for it, but you can't go to a sales rep and say, hey, get me more market share. Like you got to give them specific goals. The second type of metric is what I'd call a sales objective. This is our quota for the year. These are our sales targets. We want to increase our batting average or our close rates. We want to increase our deal size. Any salesperson wants to do that, but you can't walk over to them and say, hey, increase your deal size. They can't control that. I mean, you can train them on how to talk to the right-sized customers and how to pitch with value, but you can't go over there and change it immediately. And then the last one is sales activities. It's the salesperson, the manager, things that can be proactively managed. So making calls, having conversations, creating pipeline, getting proposals out. You start kind of bleeding a little bit into what's controllable. And so only these things are manageable. So you think about the right kind of metric when you're thinking about managing your sales team it's something that the manager can walk over, talk to someone, and it can change immediately. Walking over and talking to someone and coaching them on a close rate will not change immediately. Maybe over time you'll see it, and you have to do that, but what can you control that can change immediately? That's what a sales activity metric is, and really what you should be managing your salespeople around. So all these other things are important. Salespeople should know what they're doing and how they're measuring on these, but a lot of these aren't controllable, or you can immediately make a change. So what's in the research, what's fascinating is then you look at this, And companies say, we're very metrics driven, we measure everything, but the reality is the smallest proportion of their metrics are things that actually matter and can change people's performance. Everything else is just I'm measuring stuff. I'm measuring stuff and watching it, which of course is really important. If you can't measure it, then it's not worth doing. Like we all heard these quotes. But for your salespeople, all those people you're investing in that you're hoping to go find business, if you're not measuring and managing them around things they can control, you're not unlocking the potential of all that time and all those choices they're making throughout the day. So there's a bit of a fall down here in making sure the metrics are the right things you can really kind of get people focused on. So certainly touched on it a bit to be more specific. So the methodology, as we've called it, activity-based selling, in summary, is to understand that sales is a cascading chain of controllable behaviors that lead to a desired outcome, which is closing a deal. And it's true, you think about it, it's true of any function or any role within your company, but especially within sales, to do this right, it's understanding and believing philosophically that there's this cascading chain of events that happen that lead to an outcome. And I think this is not rocket science. I think everyone understands this, but when you think and stop, oftentimes, again, we're not measuring and managing that in the right way. But philosophically, that's what sales is about, and that's how sales has changed. Now, this does not mean that over time that salespeople are paid on how many calls they make or what. It's got to be closing deals, making revenue. That's the ultimate measure of any salesperson. That's not going to change and shouldn't change. But the only way to really manage things effectively is by thinking of it in this way. So largely this is about reverse engineering your sales process. And so we've got, and I'll kind of share it at the end. Like we have some tools that you can use to kind of help map this out, because I think people get way over, like a lot of things, way overcomplicate this. But really it's about like how do you identify, so the really simple kind of math is, all right, what's an individual salesperson's quota? How much do we want them to close? What's an average deal size? And yes, it can be all over, and you got average, low, and high, but like let's not overcomplicate it. What's a typical deal size? What does that mean in terms of number of deals that need to be won? And if that's the number of deals that need to be won by count, then how many individual proposals need to go out as an example? How many opportunities you need to uncover? How many prospecting conversations do you need? And how many calls you need to make, or whatever it might be, to get those meetings? And so, I'm, again, not rocket science, but if you stop and really reflect, have you really mapped those things out? And most people we've found really haven't. They understand it, but if you're not mapping that out and having very specific goals in front of salespeople every day, all day long, then something's missing. You're missing on the fundamentals. And I think we all know, I face this as a CEO all the time, is that sometimes you stop and you're like, gosh, I'm not executing as tightly as I need to on everything. And this is a great example of where you wonder why sales is falling apart or not kind of where you want it to. And it's a lot of times it's that daily execution that, again, most salespeople aren't kind of intuitively doing the right thing. So let's get a little bit more specific in how you actually approach this, which I kind of touched on a little bit. So the first thing, so we've done some of our own research, so work with hundreds of customers, thousands upon thousands, tens of thousands of salespeople, talk to hundreds of different sales managers and sales leaders every month. And really what we found is that there's a lot of different selling roles or profiles, but these are the four most common that we see out there in the market. So inside salespeople, lead gen or sales development, business development, there's different names for this type of role. Mid-market salespeople, field sales, and so these are the most common and generically recommended activity metrics. Again, it's different for every company and industry, et cetera, so all this has got to be customizable, but oftentimes people kind of really break it down to this. So as an example, if I'm an inside salesperson, it's prospect conversations that lead to discovery calls, that lead to proposals, that lead to closed deals. If I'm a field salesperson, it's maybe I'm having senior level conversations in person, I'm uncovering opportunities, I'm pitching a key product line, and I'm advancing my deals forward. It could be a long sales cycle, but even in a long sales cycle, large deal size, sales is still a cascading chain of activities that lead to a result. So it's all a process. So again, every company is a little bit different. I talked earlier about with CRM and new technology, you can measure a lot of this stuff more easily and in real time. So that's kind of where with inside teams, and I mentioned in the SMB or mid-market, things like calls and dials or talk time, like these are activities. And so these are common ones we've seen. Again, how do you kind of map that out and reverse engineer your sales process to kind of break that down? So step number one, I'm going to walk through the 4 steps, is to define it. So I really think that the easiest way to stop and map out your own organization and say, what are the different selling roles that I have? So typically what we find is I've got a sales development team who are uncovering opportunities. I've got a account executive team that are closing deals, and maybe I have an account management team that services our existing customers. And maybe within your salespeople, you've got different types. I've got those that call in small businesses. I have those that call in larger enterprises. So maybe you just have one, like every company is different, but just map out those different groups. Then just develop your own hypothesis. Just sit in a room by yourself. You're all smart enough to do this. And just like, all right, I'm going to make this really simple, because this stuff can turn into a political mess. And it doesn't need to. So just sit down, make your own instincts, your own hypothesis for, what do I think are the right activities? When you start getting into conversations, people, it can kind of start kind of muddying the view, and you hear all the exceptions, and it gets like really kind of frustrating, and then you end up doing nothing. So, but I think it's good as a starting point to break it down to the very basic things intuitively that you think are right. Next is, when you ultimately do this, like the team needs to be on board. So, I'm a big believer in how do you kind of get agreement and buy-in, and one of the best ways to do it is to go out and interview some of your salespeople and managers. You say, hey, I'm modifying our sales organization to take a more activity-based approach around the controllable activities that'll help people be more successful. Companies that are sales organizations that are fast-growing are all doing this. So I want to understand from you. And so I generally recommend go grab 1 or 2 of the top sellers and ask questions like, what do you think that you do that's uniquely different, that's unique compared to your peers? Like, where do you spend your time day in and day out? And sometimes you have to probe pretty deep and dig, because again, they don't know what they're doing. So you have to figure out and kind of comb through it a little bit. Next, talk to some middle performers. Hey, what do you do? How do you spend your time throughout the day? What is it that you're trying to really focus your energy on? What do you perceive that top performers are doing that you're not doing? And that's where you start hearing things like, well, you know what, I never seem to find enough time to prospect. Or I always seem to get caught up in customer service calls, things like I mentioned earlier. I get caught up in that kind of stuff. And I know that I shouldn't be doing that, but I get caught up in that. So you'll start getting people, this is that buy-in that starts have people admit that they realize that maybe they're not doing a lot of this stuff right. I had a story. I was talking to a salesperson the other day, and it was doing an interview like this, and this was a top performer. And again, it took some digging to figure out the right things. But I said, what do you think that your peers are doing who aren't doing as well as you are that is inhibiting their success? And the story is what is top of mind for me, where he said, you know what, I look at my peers, and there's this other guy who he is more articulate than I am. He's got our pitch down better than I do. He just really understands, very passionate, great with customers, but I'm constantly seeing him running around on these customer service issues that pop up because the customer emails him because they like him, and he's got great relationships, and he's not leveraging. We have a customer support team. He just jumps on it and thinks that he's got to own it versus delegating it off and quickly responding and kind of then stay focused on my job. And he also spends all this time on trying to craft the perfect proposal, and I always see him doing this, but he's not kind of doing the right things day to day. Those are the kind of things when you uncover those little stories. That's what happens. But that's a good example of a top seller intuitively doesn't realize what they're doing, but sometimes you can get those insights through an effective conversation. Also important to interview some managers, some frontline sales managers. What do you perceive? What do you think your team needs to be doing that they're not doing and you know it? What's one thing that if you could snap your fingers and the sales team would start doing right now, what would it be? This is going to uncover a lot of the metrics, and often you'll be surprised they probably kind of match your hypothesis, which is kind of always feels good. Makes you feel smart, but when you uncover this stuff, it really helps. So then you got to figure out, all right, can I measure this stuff? So now that I've maybe narrowed down, the critical selling activities that I want to manage around, how am I going to measure them? Because if I can't measure them, then I'm going to be in trouble, and this whole thing's going to fall apart later, which we'll get to. So just to understand, is our CRM system enabled to track these things properly and in real time? Are our salespeople able to log them? And then that requires a little bit of training, which they'll buy into once they get this stuff. But and make any adjustments as you need to. Typically, what I'll see is you might say, here's a list of the 6, 7, 8 different possible sales activity metrics you want to manage. and I would love to do all these, but I got to see, is it possible to freely measure those now? And I might have to boot a couple of them because like I just don't have time, I can't measure it, or we'll get to that later. You really want to narrow this down to only 3 or 4. You can't tell anyone, let alone a salesperson, here's the 8 things to focus on. You got to narrow it down and keep it really simple. So you got to go through that prioritization exercise. Also, I think it's valuable that when you break this down, and so if you have like 4 in each of these roles, you kind of see over to the right, come up with some weighting system. So as an example, you might say, if I'm assessing a salesperson on all these different critical activities, how would I weigh them? So sales or closing deals, of course, is most important. Maybe you say, hey, that's like 60, 70% of how I measure a salesperson. The next one might be 20% weighting, and the next 2 are 10%, 10%. So like everybody understands, like you can't just make a bunch of calls and think you're successful. It's got to drop down to these next step outcomes that cascade out of it. But when you put that weighting on there, what it ultimately allows you to do is monitor your team on this composite scoring, basically. And you can figure this out through spreadsheets or through a system like ours. But like really what you're doing is you can answer the question when you think, how are my salespeople doing? Right now you generally just pull up, all right, who's had quota? How much is everyone? Whoever's sold the most, those are the ones who are doing best, which of course is the ultimate measure. But this is another view into it to say on this composite score of all these things balanced out, how's everybody doing? And sometimes they don't always match. That your very top sellers probably have a very high score because they're doing the right things right, but it's helpful to look at the middle and the bottom to see like maybe their scoring is, that's kind of ultimately where it's going to get. So that weighting is really helpful. Next is now that you've kind of pulled all your stuff together in your define stage, it's time to how do I now get the team aligned? So the first is like go grab that list of priority metrics that you've come up with, and maybe it's a longer list, and review it with the salespeople and particularly the sales managers and say, hey, here's what I've found. What do we think are really the most important ones, and let's try to get some agreement and buy-in here. So of course you're never going to get everyone to agree, but that's not the point. You just want to get everyone to understand and figure out what's really going to be most important. You have to align everybody around this. You can't have one region doing something different than another. If they're in different roles, it's different. But if you have a common way to do it, then all of a sudden people can really learn from each other. So that's first, like review all this with your sales managers to make sure they're on board, because ultimately you're going to expect them to coach and manage around it, which we'll get to. Next is to develop these personalized scorecards. So again, you can do this through a report or through Excel or again through a system like Level 11 or others that are out there. That every rep, and this is what so often a financial plans or metrics plans are created in a conference room with your finance team that knows Excel really well, and they never leave there. So how do you then take this and break it down so that every salesperson knows that what's expected of them? Not to say, hey, as a team, here's our numbers, but me as a rep, specifically, what do I need to do? This is these personal scorecards, so every rep knows exactly where do I need to focus my time. So throughout the day, where am I ahead, where am I behind, so I can kind of gear my performance. And then you want to display this stuff, like figure out a way, like, I walk in a lot of different offices where we have this data up on whiteboards, fine. Like just if that's where you start, fine. So you can automate this stuff and broadcast it, with technology, but you have to be publicly sharing this information. So companies that haven't quite moved to the step where they want to use software to automate it, they're taking this data and putting it on whiteboards, or they're creating their very complicated spreadsheets and emailing them out. It's fine, it's a great place to start. But the point is you have to get it in front of people and review it constantly. Step 3 we call calibrate. So this is how do you get so when you use stack rankings to show people where they stand compared to others, that naturally organically drives learning. So when everyone knows they're being measured around meetings or demos or whatever it might be, and you're publicly displaying that, and you're not shaming people, you're just saying, hey, here's where everybody stands. People naturally, what happens is the sales rep starts going and talking to their peers and saying, hey, I noticed that you're really great at getting these prospecting meetings to happen. How are you finding the time to do that? What are you doing that maybe I'm not? And when that's natural and organic, that's really powerful. Much more powerful than a manager saying, hey, Mary, or hey, John, hey, you're really missing on this. Go talk to Mary because she's great. And it feels like I just got I'm in trouble, I got to go do it. Where if you can get people to self-inspire to kind of go hunt it down, that's pretty powerful. One-on-ones is so important. I could do a whole session on it. You have to do regular one-on-ones with your salespeople, whether they're weekly, every other week, whatever it might be. But suddenly you're going to use these, like, typical one-on-one is, hey, how's it going? What's closing this week? And I don't know what else to talk about. So if you have these operating metrics, then suddenly those turn into a portion of them are an objective conversation around, are we really doing what's necessary to get the results that we need, and are you doing what's needed? And often it makes a sales rep stop and say, gosh, there I am again. I'm not doing what I know that I need to do. So the manager is there to help them, like a personal trainer. You know you need to do it, but you need someone there to kind of help guide you a little bit more. And then, of course, you're going to course correct. Contests are a great way to lift things up. You've got to rally the team around something. That's kind of the calibrate. And then last, like, now you're ready to really accelerate, you know, as visualized by this guy on the motorcycle. So it's pretty cool. So now you can really grow. So, you know, again, going back to the beginning, when you think about how do I grow, just like throw more salespeople at it. You know, unless you've really figured out your core operating metrics and people are now operating more efficiently, you know, by doing everything we talked about, then you're ready to start adding more people on top of it. This again is where I think people make the mistake of, if I just buy that sales technology that will make me dial faster, like that's going to be the answer. But if you just don't have the right foundation in place, like, then that doesn't matter. Like, throw that on when you know I've got this kind of system, my activity-based system set, and now it's a matter of, all right, people are generally operating correctly. Now I just want to make more calls happen. I just want to make more meetings happen or make them more effective. But my operating metrics are in place. Now I'm ready to kind of increase the output from it. And I talk a little bit about the onboarding process. So that's the really simple. I mean, you're always going to refine it. You're always going to kind of come back and adjust things as you learn over time or as your company grows. Goals will adjust, you know, for different people. But, you know, again, that's a very simplistic: define, align, calibrate, accelerate. So that's all I have for today. Happy to open it up for questions. We do have a little bit more content out there. If you go to level11.com/inbound16. Also, we have our own exclusive report on the sales KPI report. So if you'd like to see some more detail around what I showed you earlier, just you know, either give me your card or we'll have someone kind of grab them out the door. Be happy to send that to you. So, but that's all I have. Happy to take any questions in the last few minutes if we have it.